Hey, welcome into a bonus episode of Texans on Tap Free Agency Edition. I'm Brandon Strange alongside Charlie Palillo and Josh Jordan. You can follow them on X at Palillo and at Josh Jordan 975. Just a quick reminder, we are closing in ever so closer to the draft. And then that leads to OTAs, and then that leads to training camp. And we want to be with you. And I know you've heard it before, but to follow us on that ride, all you have to do is hit subscribe on the channel. No product pitches, no paywalls, just three dudes talking about some ball. And if you're already subscribed, hitting like on the video is another great way of supporting the channel. Charlie, I'm going to start with your tweet from Tuesday night. You said, unaware of any reports about hell freezing over, but the Texans are closing fast on genuine Super Bowl contender status. Let's start with the defense, because I think that's where a lot of people are excited about. A lot of additions, none bigger than Danielle Hunter, we're looking at Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson Jr. on the edges. So we have to add this little insert. As we were recording the defense portion of our conversation, per Adam Schefter, Malik Collins has been traded to the 49ers. Gentlemen, news comes quick. So what's your surprise level at Collins being traded? And do you think this is a sign of a second shoe to drop here? Perhaps we talked about it during the recording. Eric Armstead possibly being a target. Does this put that back on the table?
Yeah, there's has to be the train's in the tunnel on what's going to be the subsequent move. Malik Collins had a very solid season here. Now, no one should be. If there is no subsequent move, it's not like they just cut the late Reggie White or John Randall or Christian Wilkins, who's the top free agent defensive tackle on the board, who left the Dolphins. But Collins was good. And with Rankins a free agent with no indication of the Texans having shown interest in bringing him back, Danico Autry, as a sign, is going to be a majority snap player at one tackle spot. Well, you want someone else. And presumably it was going to be Malik Collins. I mean, the Texans take a multi-million-dollar dead cap hit on this, but they will net savings above what Collins would have been on the books had he been here. Eric Armstead, right? If that's the B, A leads to B, he's just flat out a much better player than Malik Collins. Well, the 49ers are cutting him because he was looking at more than a $25 million cap hit, a base salary of $17 million. He wouldn't agree to a pay cut. Well, sometimes you'll take less money somewhere else if you have control over where that somewhere else is. So if it nets out, Collins out, Armstead in, it's another upgrade. Because in moving off of Collins, it's not like the Texans are in a salary cap straitjacket after signing Danielle Hunter and Danico Autry, the other moves that they made. So yes, that other shoe will be dropping, and let's hope it's a loud one.
It's starting to make me wonder if we're seeing that D'Amico has a type that he likes for his defensive linemen, where, you look at Autry, 6'5", 285. You look at Eric Armstead, if they indeed do go after him, he's 6'7", 290. Will Anderson is a taller, lankier type pass rusher. So, Malik Collins comes in at about 6'2", 310 pounds. So I wonder if D'Amico's just trying to find more of a rangy, tall guy that he prefers on his defensive line. So I think that'll be something to pay attention to. Charlie mentioned it, maybe Rankins they bring back. I wouldn't count on that, but maybe. But yeah, I feel like some other move has to be coming here. But I think D'Amico might be telling us that this is what I like in my players, and a lot of them seem to have come from the 49ers. So we'll see what happens. It's exciting. It's a shame for Malik Collins. I agree with Charlie. I thought he had a nice year last year. But hey, if you're going to get sent away in a trade, 49ers, it could be a lot worse.
This does speak to the Texans being in this window where they can be aggressive. And while C.J. Stroud is cheap, you need to make hay, a whole bunch of it. Because while the 49ers have Brock Purdy on a nothing contract for another year or two, unless they choose to significantly bump him up before his time comes, when you are a mature perennial contender, as the Niners now have been for a few years, well, you have star players. You can't pay everybody. But a couple of years ago, they traded DeForest Buckner stud defensive lineman to the Colts because he was just too rich within their payroll. Eric Armstead is a stud, and now they're moving off of him because he's too rich to fit within their payroll because they pay Deebo Samuel and they pay Christian McCaffrey and they pay Fred Warner and a handful of other just tremendous, tremendous players. So while the Texans have this flexibility, now is the time to strike because not this year, not next year, but people way too cavalier throw around. They're building a dynasty. No, they're not. Let them build a real contender first, and then you can address sustainability once you become a bona fide contender. The Texans are on the cusp of that, but you're not guaranteed anything beyond that.
You can't pay everybody. So it'll be interesting to see how the Texans kind of maneuver, and they do have a little bit more money left to spend here. I'm very curious to see what Nick's going to do. So far, I've been impressed. As we were all kind of disappointed the first day when all the running backs went off the board, well, you were rewarded the next day because if you went and paid Saquon Barkley all that money, you're probably not getting Hunter and some of these other moves. So far, I like what they're doing.
Now, let's go back to our conversation and just keep that in mind as we mentioned guys like Malik Collins and Eric Armstead. That's pretty exciting. Charlie, what do you expect from this defensive core now from the Texans that they've assembled?
Well, championship teams have depth. And as huge a leap as the Texans made in 2023, look, there are starting positions that you're saying, yeah, you'd like to improve there, at least incrementally, but the depth needed a boost. And I just don't mean in case guys get injured type depth. I mean, guys you want playing snaps. And they fortified really at all levels, but most notably the D-line and the secondary in the depth department, with still a little work to be done, I think, particularly in the secondary. But Danielle Hunter is the perfect acquisition for this team in this phase. With C.J. Stroud, 3 more years, dirt cheap by NFL contracts go on his rookie deal, the Texans can, quote-unquote, overpay. And with the cap going up by more than $30 million, a lot of the contracts seem like egregious overpays, or you have to be kidding me money. Hunter's deal is not going to be perceived around the NFL as, oh man, the Texans way overshot the runway in what they put out for that guy. 2 years, I'm amused by $49 million, but only $48 million of it guaranteed. So we'll call it $24 million per year for a premium player who saved a 2-year window where he lost an entire season to injury and most of another. This has been an exceptionally durable player. The last 2 years, he's been durable and sensational. Right? The Texans aren't replacing chopped liver in Jonathan Gennard's 2023 production, but he's been inconsistent year to year. When Hunter's on the field, he's really good. He should still be maybe in the back end of his prime, 30 years old, but in it, coming off a 16 and a half sack season. And every down player, throw in, one would hope, a little additional juice, a Houstonian, college ball, LSU now joining an ascendant team, or presumably a still ascendant team. So this is a great bookend. Will Anderson, don't undersell Danico Autry, who the Texans have seen twice per year within the division, Colts and then Titans. Mild concern that, okay, he'll be 34 years old when the season starts, but he's coming off a double-digit sack season himself. You're not going to want him to be a 3-down player, mindful of his age. So now you have the edge guys in Hunter and Anderson. Autry's going to do the majority of his rushing from the inside. Rundowns, Folukasi, who they pick up. You're not a pass rusher. That's fine. He's going to be their wide load, maybe the replacement for Sheldon Rankins, presumably the replacement for Sheldon Rankins. Their front has improved substantially, technically, when everything becomes signed, sealed, and delivered. I know day one caused much consternation. Free agency, the tampering window is more than 1 day. And Nick Caserio, you want to call it keeping powder dry or waiting to pounce. But that Hunter contract, wow, money, more than they've ever paid for a season for any player. If not now, when? And the answer is now.
Yeah, it's interesting with Caserio. He's still sticking to this 1-2 year deal kind of thing. He went a little above that with Azeez Al-Shire with a 3-year deal, but you could tell that's a guy D'Amico really wanted. That, he had coached him with the 49ers. They tried to get him last year and they ended up signing that 1-year deal with the Titans. So they finally get their guy. I think D'Amico sees it as an upgrade over Perryman and Cashman, and I do as well. I love this move right here. So you get your linebacker, and then I like the Fatukasi. We'll see what he does, but yeah, he's a run stuffer. You only had to pay him 1 year. He played at the Jets, so he's played under Saleh, who obviously D'Amico is very familiar with from his days at San Francisco. So he knows what's going to be asked of him. The Autry move I love, and as I'm listening to a lot of people talk about it, the Lance Zierleins of the world, they think Autry's a guy that they might kick inside, on third down, something like that. So you got 3 pass rushers coming at you when you got to get rid of the ball. That's going to be scary. So Malik Collins can, push the pocket as well. So, man, when you're a nickel, it's third down, it's a passing situation, they are going to be able to get to that quarterback. And I mean, we'll go back to Hunter, who Charlie talked about. I love this move. It's only 2 years. He's 29 now. I think he'll turn 30 in October. So you get him for just, those 2 seasons. I mean, he maybe had the best year of his career last year, arguably. It was an incredible season. You even saw J.J. Watt talking about how great Hunter was during the season. So, I mean, there's nothing not to like about these moves. That Jeff Okudah, we'll see how that works, the corner signing. I don't feel like he's better than Steven Nelson. All these other deals, I feel like the Texans basically upgraded. But with Okudah, there's a reason he's bounced around to different teams. He hasn't lived up to that draft status. Hopefully he can figure out something here. I think that's where they're going to go in the draft. What's really nice about plugging all these holes is, if the corner you like falls to you at 23, you could take them. If one of these wide receivers falls to you that you like, you can go that route. So there's a lot of different options, a lot of flexibility for the Texans in this spot. So I think it's just a great job of D'Amico and Caserio kind of covering all their needs. On offense too, basically all your receivers for now are coming back. So you don't have to reach for a receiver if there's a corner there that you really like.
They're a corner shy. Okudah, tantalizing. This guy was the 3rd pick in the draft coming out. A couple of catastrophic injuries that undercut his career. He was healthy last season, but lost his starting job down the stretch with an Atlanta Falcons team that was trying to make a move to get into playoff contention. So it wasn't just play a young guy instead of Okudah, but it's a zero risk, at least moderate reward possible play on 1 year at under $5 million. Off how they've played football, it's a downgrade from Steven Nelson. So Josh references a draft potential there. There's still plenty of talent that will kind of fall through the sifter in free agency. So maybe there's a bargain ad to make. And again, in terms of depth in the secondary, welcome back, Lonnie Johnson. Failed second-round pick the first time around. Well, at least via X, he's expressed some modesty and personal growth, and that the second time around, he's better prepared to be a solid pro here. Eric Murray was an atrocious Bill O'Brien, ridiculous contract signing, but now bringing him back at relative nickels and dimes on the dollar, if not quite pennies on the dollar, as a depth guy, as a special teamer. Mike Ford, who they bring down from the Cleveland Browns, similarly, 1 year, just $2 million. So they're growing out the roster now. They had this real good salary cap window, and Caserio is doing very, very solid work. Not complete, but making a lot of progress. And just to take it to Brandon, to the X, which still sounds funny that you referenced, a couple of things. One, the Texans' schedule is very arduous, so the team could be better, but the results don't automatically go forward. They should be 12-5, 13-4. I don't think so. They should make the AFC Championship game, or the season's a failure. We're not quite there yet. Be a tremendous development if Patrick Mahomes up and retired, shockingly and suddenly. But Miami has taken some hits. Buffalo has taken some hits. Baltimore has been some addition and subtraction, but to this point, I think Baltimore nets out, dropping down to at least a step, whereas the Texans have clearly gone forward. I'm not going to say a quantum leap forward because Grenard had a phenomenal season. Blake Cashman was very good, but I think the players that the Texans are replacing them with, I would rather have in 2024 than the guys that they're replacing.
Yeah, but Grenard, he was hurt last year. That's been the MO on him. That's why they didn't want to have to commit all that money to him. And he doesn't play as many snaps as somebody like Hunter does. He was more in a rotation. So, I mean, Hunter's one of those guys, you got to know where he is every second. And knock on wood, he's been very healthy. And the Murray thing that you brought up, Charlie, I think that's huge. Jimmy Ward missed a lot of time last year due to injury. He's another year older. He's already been in his 30s. So that's somebody that you're going to have to look at safety. I'll be curious to see, do they make another move at safety here before this is all said and done? I'd like to see him address it in the draft. If they don't do it in free agency, that's somewhere I'll be looking. As I look across the division, the Colts, they were the other team in play for Hunter. And at least that was what was reported. So not only did you get him, you kept the Colts from getting him, which I think is huge. And then looking at Jacksonville, I don't feel like they've done a ton. I think they could be really stout at wide receiver, though, with the Gabe Davis signing. And we'll see if Calvin Ridley comes back to them. It's rumored that that's going to be the case. They're just waiting for the new league year to start. So that could be Christian Kirk and Davis and Ridley. Those are three really good receivers for Trevor Lawrence. So Texans, they'd be smart to make sure they get another corner that they can count on.
Sean Pendergast made the observation that Nick Caserio would work well seemingly under a Jim Crane regime, given the frugality of the deals that he made. Another guy that was out there seemingly tied to Houston was Eric Armstead, because, but it's obviously because of a contract dispute. They won't ask him to take a pay cut. So that's probably pie in the sky, especially after all these other moves have been made. Are you surprised maybe that Houston didn't make that move, considering the San Francisco ties and D'Amico? And then I guess the other thing is, if you had to guess a next move to come down on defense, is it that corner spot?
Not surprised on Armstead, because he's probably looking for significant money, and the Texans, they needed to address D-line. So once Hunter said, yeah, I'll take 2 years, 48, 49 million. Autry took 2 years, 20 million. I mean, it'd be great if you're building out an all-star defensive line, but Armstead's a pretty every down type player. So where are the snaps for him at the money that he would also consume under the cap? I'll say it's secondary, whether corner or safety. To me, Jimmy Ward should still be a cut candidate. You can save $4 million of cap space by moving on from him. I think it's an essential year of development for Jalen Petrie for a rookie season. Hey, he can hit, a lot of promise. Second season struggled a lot in coverage, disappointing, but not someone that you kick to the curb, still on his rookie contract, young player, has the raw materials. But safety, I think, still remains a question. Do they have one guy that you're saying you think is an above average starting safety at this point? I think the answer is clearly no. Whereas at cornerback, at least you have Derek Stingley Jr. as your foundation.
Yeah, and hitting on Stingley, I mean, as great as he was last year, he's missed a lot of games over the first 2 years of his career. So I think it'd be a little risky to me to just assume that he's going to be out there for you every game next season. That just hasn't been the case. Hopefully he's on the right path now. We don't have to worry about that anymore. But, hope only gets you so far. You got to have some options here. It is football. Fluky things happen. I mean, that hamstring kept him out for a while. He's had the foot injury. And then, with Armstead, he had a right meniscus injury that he's still working through. So you wonder if maybe they wait a little while with him to where he's fully recovered so he can work out for teams later in the process, maybe get a little more money. I don't know if that's pre-draft or post-draft, but, after the draft, teams kind of see where they have needs and then they start making some different decisions. So I'll be curious to see what happens with him. I think Texans cap had it. There's somewhere around maybe 25 million left in cap space. They're going to have to keep some of that for the rookies. So, I know they signed a swing tackle today as well. So I don't know how much more money they have to spend. So that's something I'll keep my eye on. Maybe some of these smaller moves. I'd love to see them do more and get right up against the cap, but I'm not, and then they're going to want to probably save some maybe for in season if there's injuries or, trade deadline, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you always have to hold back some. Their draft class projects to be about $2.5 million. So working from that 25 number, if they choose to aggressively two-way street, but a Malik Collins extension where you front some of that money, put it on your 2024 cap. But that cap is going to go up still, not 30 million next year, but probably at least another 10. So you're mindful of that in your planning. And it's not personal, fellas, but you release Jimmy Ward and Robert Woods, that's $9 million of cap savings. And while the first days of free agency, wildly exciting, billions of dollars flying around, the Texans making impact moves, not everything is going to be done by the end of this week. There'll be players who are disappointed with what their market turned out to be, so they're going to wait it out a little bit. There'll be more players cut that get to market. I think the Texans defensively, we said secondary, linebacker, maybe as another depth addition, and special teams are populated by several linebackers. And on the offensive side, I'd still like to see them get after a guard. So is there one still moderate to not top of market price guy, but a $7 to $10 million player, if they think that guy's a fit? I still don't rule that out as an additional move.
Yeah, and to steal a phrase, there's also reason to keep the powder dry for in-season moves should you need to sign an injury replacement, which, knock on wood, hopefully that's not necessary, but usually is. That's going to be it for part 1 of Texans on Tap. We're going to talk about the offense and special teams in part 2, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel and be on the lookout for that video when it drops. It will be releasing shortly, and as always, go Texans.